P&R with Adam R. Welcome to 3P&R. I'm your host, Adam R. And on this episode, I have Dylan Jones, PhD, parapsychologist. How you doing, sir?
I'm very well. How are you this evening?
Good. Thank you for being on. I'm glad to have you on.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm really digging the shirt I'm looking at, by the way, the Ghostbusters shirt. And that's the actual car in the background, yeah?
It is. That was when I went to the 35th anniversary at Sony Studios back in 2019.
That must have been cool. I want to see that car.
Oh, she's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, well, I imagine they'd let you drive it. I would want to drive it.
I would love to drive that car.
All right, so your background, you were a police constable for 17 years, right?
That's right. Yeah, I joined when I was 20, spent just over 17 years, but sadly I got injured when I was on duty, so I had to retire early.
Huh. All right, so I mean, as a constable, what was your primary job?
Well, I did 7 years, as we say in Britain, on the beat, which is just dealing with, day-to-day patrol, dealing with all the things that most police officers have to deal with, from crime, traffic, and all those kinds of things. And then for the last 10 years, I went and specialised in crime prevention and education. So trying to prevent young people from getting into crime and getting involved in drugs. So that's primarily what I did for the last 10 years.
That had to be tough.
It was challenging, put it that way, but it was an enjoyable job. And I think, I certainly hoped I did a lot of good when I was doing it.
Well, it certainly prepared you for a good perspective in what you got involved with. What shifted you in this direction?
Well, it all started actually in childhood. When I was about 7 years old, my uncle passed away. We were very, very close. And it was a few months after he died that I woke up in the middle of the night and thought I saw him standing in my bedroom doorway and then gradually faded away. So that was the first sort of experience that I had with anything to do with ghosts. And even though it's explainable now by sort of psychological explanations that it's a hypnopompic experience when you're waking up from a dreamlike state, that was one of the first things that got me intrigued. But then, and we've already alluded to the car, late 1984, when Ghostbusters came out in the UK, I pestered my mum to take me to the cinema to go and see it. And that was it. So it was a mixture of the paranormal and the media together that really shaped things then through the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's why I'm doing the podcast, for these subjects anyway. It's my childhood curiosity, my imagination, in combination. I lost it in my teens and 20s. I was out doing, shooting pool, doing other things.
Yeah.
And then, 2017 rolls around and the U.S. military releases their video, the UFOs they've seen, and it's undeniable proof in my opinion. And COVID happens. And I have a lot of downtime. And I start watching documentaries. I'm listening to podcasts. And that relationship with that curiosity, the fire was set. It was, at that point, I knew what I had to do. I wanted to be the one asking questions.
Yeah, and it's a great thing to do. Ask questions is the main thing you need to be able to do.
Yeah, and I approach everything open-minded. I have no official position on anything. Because I've never witnessed anything in my life. And that's part of this, the drive and this curiosity, why I want to do it more, because I desperately want to see something. There's that other thing too, where the afterlife. Like, is there something after this? And did this all mean something? Of course that plays a role, but ultimately it's the curiosity factor. Yeah,
it's huge, isn't it? That's what spurs me on.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a weird person too, as you get to know me in time. I'll hear something strange and I got to go see it right away.
Yeah.
9 out of 10 times I'll see nothing. And then that 1% is, the cat or something explainable anyhow. I think maybe I'm unlucky in that put together. I haven't seen anything. But for you got your PhD in parapsychology.
I'm actually in the middle of doing my PhD.
Okay. And how's that going so far? You liking it?
I'm absolutely loving it. I just wish I'd started it years ago. I'm doing mine part-time because I have a full-time job because, when you're involved in academic parapsychology, it doesn't pay the bills.
Right.
There are not many jobs where you can actually get a job as a parapsychologist. So I'm doing my PhD part-time over 6 years, which is, it's getting your head around the fact that it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
And trying to balance that with the day job.
Yeah, it's tough. I think in the future here, I think what you're doing is going to have a greater calling in the upcoming years. I think technology is going to put us to the point where some of these things we call unexplainable, we're going to, even in the realm of let's say, apparitions. We have these things now where we could detect, what was it? There's another couple that comes on the show, Dawn and Laney, Spectra Waves, and they do paranormal research and investigating. And they're using an item from Xbox where it's like, you know, recognizes where you are in a room. So whatever you do in a room reacts to the game itself.
The Kinect.
The Kinect.
Yeah.
And so it's picking up something. There's been some cases where facial recognition machines were catching something that was not there. I think technology is going to open that doorway soon. And what's going to happen is people like yourself are going to be the first to call because you specialize in it.
Hopefully that will be the case, but my PhD research is actually studying the kinds of people that you've just mentioned. I'm actually studying the way the ghost hunters behave,
right,
and why they do the things that they do, and all the issues that surround it. So it's really fascinating because I think it's great that people are interested in this. I think there is so much to be learned. You know, there are so many questions. But unfortunately, the way that they do things, I think that they're slightly skewed.
Right.
That they're using the equipment. But when you start, and what I found so far in the research is when you start asking them really sort of probing questions about why they're using the equipment and taking the stages apart, they don't have the depth. They don't have the actual real understanding. And I'm looking to see whether or not the media are responsible for that.
Yeah, and it's important. I say that because there's this big thing, especially with the networks, where they make things grander than what they really are.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do a documentary. I'm going to travel everywhere doing a documentary, whether it be UFOs, ghosts, or I don't know, Bigfoot, whatever it is. And look, it might just be the most boring documentary you watch because I'm not going to put excitement where it doesn't belong. If I find something, great. If I don't, it's just going to be me staring off into something or trying to find something. I'm not going to add suspense there for people to like it. Ultimately, This is to satisfy my childhood curiosity, right?
Yeah, sure.
And, I have this kind of motto I go by where there's no bad information, right? All information is good. You just have to filter correctly.
Yeah.
And so I'm building a network, and people like yourself and other people I speak to on the show, I'm going to use them as guides. Well, where did you find something? Where was it? I'm going to go to that spot as opposed to just aimlessly walking around. But in your investigations, where are you in the percentage of how do you feel about ghosts overall?
To me, that's the most fascinating part of the whole paranormal realm. That's the one thing that I've always been drawn to, as opposed to the UFOs or things like cryptozoology, Bigfoot, that kind of thing. There's definitely a place for people to look at it, but my whole life has been literally wrapped around ghosts, hauntings, poltergeists, that area. I'm completely open-minded. I think as a scientist, you need to be open to all the different explanations of what could be responsible for each individual case. I've spoken to plenty of people who are sane, reasonable, rational, and they have some rather interesting experiences. And those experiences deserve to be studied and studied appropriately. So for me, the jury is still out. There are a lot of explanations for many sightings that can be misinterpretation. From the policing experience, I know that witnesses can be wrong. People do misinterpret things that they see, not out of, not being malicious, but right. I've interviewed people where they were absolutely adamant that they'd seen something in a particular way, and then you see the CCTV footage, and it's not that way. And they're left scratching their head thinking, well, I'm sure I saw it that way. the human memory is a strange thing. It does some strange things.
Yeah, I agree.
Have you ever seen the video with where they ask you to count the people passing the basketball back and forward?
No, I haven't. You'll have to send that to me. I love stuff like that.
Yep, there's a video of the psychologist tells you to watch the video, and you count the ball going back and forth, and you've got to count up how many times it was passed between each person. And then they say to you, "Did you notice the gorilla walking through the shot?"
Huh.
And you're like, "No." And they play it back, and a guy dressed in a gorilla suit walks right through the video. And if you go onto YouTube, you can find it. And what it says and what it's showing is that when you're focused on one thing, you very often miss what else is going on around you.
That is true.
And it can be very much the same in haunting type experiences. And yeah, unfortunately, witnesses can be wrong.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. That's why I'm really banking on. I'm talking to I do a lot of off podcast interviews. A lot of these people, they don't want their name out there. They just want to share their experience. And I got to tell you, it's endless. And a lot of these guys are doctors, cops, lawyers, and then there's the regular people. But they just get on, they speak what they see, and the reason they're speaking, I think, is because they're hoping I'd spoken to other people that saw that exact thing, then they could explain it for themselves. For instance, the doctor in a training facility adjacent to the hospital was in there after hours prepping for the next day's study. And in his peripheral vision, he thought he saw someone standing there. He turned to ask the individual, what you're doing in the building at this hour. And he said the word evaporated, but I think dematerialized is a better way to say, right? Is how he perceived it anyhow. Right. And that bothered him. He's a man of science. And from what I've learned about him, he has no real religious, background. So for him in that incident, he had am I lack of sleep? What did I eat today? Like, he was diagnosing himself, and it drove him nuts for years. And he just wanted some sort of outlet to speak about it.
Mm.
For you, do you have something where people, like, let's say that doctor, for instance, if he wants to reach out to you, say, "Hey, I just want to talk about this and get your side of what you think anyhow." Do you have a platform people could reach you on?
I do, but I'm a member of the Society for Psychical Research, and I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
No, I don't think I have, but I'll attach whatever to the channel, and I'll research it.
Well, the SPR is the founding academic organization, the longest academic organization in the world dedicated to the study of anomalous phenomena. It was founded in 1862 in London, and it comprised people from Great Oxford University, Cambridge, academic minds. People like Arthur Conan Doyle were members in the early days. British prime ministers were mentioned. And then a few years later, the American Society for Psychical Research was founded. And it's that organization which are really which have done a lot of the research over the last 100 odd years. And I joined them, and I'm very fortunate to work with some great colleagues across different backgrounds who will, be able to provide other expertise in the realms of physics and psychology. Because I come from primarily a cultural and sociological background,
right,
in my research. So when it's questions about what it could be in relation to psychological aspects, I would hand over then to somebody who is an expert in that field. So the SPR have done a lot of the work over the decades about trying to put the sort of standards in place of how investigations should be done. So, if people were to come to me with anything, I would have an input, but also that my colleagues would be, would be also joining in and doing that as well.
Well, that's a good thing. You have a panel, right?
Yeah.
Look, more minds are great. I say this a lot too, because people, I have friends of mine are like, "Well, what are you getting involved with this for?" I'm like, well, it's simple. It's unknown right now, but then you consider today's science was yesterday's theory. Yesterday's theory was a child's imagination and curiosity. It all falls in line like that.
Mm.
And again, for me with the UFOs, it was a great story as a kid until 2017 rolled around and our military seen what they're seeing. And I'm pretty good about explaining videos. And I even like the paranormal videos where I see these people are seeing things. The one thing I look for always is the adrenaline dump. I'm a pretty tough dude in real life, but if an apparition, no matter how badly I want to see it, if it appears before me now, I'm dumping adrenaline. There's going to be shake in my arm. The pitch, my breathing's going to change. I look for those things in a lot of these videos, and I dismiss a lot of them because of that. Yeah. There's one video I'd spoken on the show so many times where this guy recorded something, and it was broad daylight, and it was upside down, like inverted in a doorway, and you could sense fear all over this guy. Like the adrenaline dump was present. His shaking, his breathing got intense. The pitch of his voice. I look for that, and so that's the one where I have to stamp the I don't know, because I took the image from that video through a program I have on my computer. I couldn't figure out what the hell that was. And in turn, it actually gave me chills. And again, the guy, he didn't want to go near his own house. And you could see, to me, the authenticity of just his face and his expressions, his voice. So I look for that a lot. And I imagine that's something you look for a lot too, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that, that we look for when you're dealing with any evidence that comes forward. And part of the problem is, I think a lot of the time people forget that to have a paranormal experience, you have to have a human element. You have to have a human experience. There is somebody who's a witness to this. And I think the first thing you need to do is sort of put the technology to one side and focus on the person who's had the experience. So, interviewing them, getting them to go through everything that happened and actually writing it all down and documenting it that way. And then getting somebody to look at the actual footage. And it's getting the right person to have a look at it as well.
Right.
Because unfortunately now and you'll know this with anybody who makes videos, it's so difficult to address the authenticity of the footage, because anything can be manipulated so easy nowadays. And you've always, that's the one question you've always going to be batting around is it genuine? And there will always be people who will say, no, it's fake. It's a fraud.
Yeah.
And it's going back to getting the actual, what it's been recorded on, the memory, the memory card, getting that, analyzed. There's all sorts of things to have to go through to be able to pick apart the evidence to see what you've actually got. And there will always be people who will level it, that person's a good actor, or
yeah,
putting it on,
or a sociopath who's just driven by, that's there's some psychological factors with people where you couldn't tell if they were lying or not. They're remarkable at telling what they are saying, lying to people. It's pre-programmed, right? It's so, Douglas Wilson from MUFON, he's going to be on here soon. He's going to discuss what he would prefer for as far as what you would use to capture stuff. Cause I don't want to say all of it. It'll be in the upcoming program, but the one he did say is to get a film camera, because digital again it's compensating to see what it is you're seeing. So you're not actually getting a real image of what you're seeing. You're getting the digital compensation thereof.
Yes.
And then there's other materials I'm going to discuss when I'm on there. But when I hear that, it reminds me of how tough it is to tell what's what. And that's why I'm the way I am with some of the videos. I don't mean to be dismissive, but if you're in a pitch black room and some entity rolls up on you and I don't hear an adrenaline dump or a breathing, I now know you're part of something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because again, I'm a pretty tough dude. I'm not very fearless in a lot of ways. But if I'm in a dark room and something appears, believe me, the adrenaline's right by. And it's not even fear. Adrenaline is just a thing you dump with your body. It's your body's fight or flight mechanism. It's automatic. It's an unavoidable thing. So I look for that a lot. And for you, I imagine it's got to be tough, because the point you brought about the evidence they present, that's got to be a pain.
It is. It's being methodological about it. And it's being critical about it as well. And I think that's what some people find hard to understand, is that, when I'm dealing with a lot of the groups and I'm watching them and I'm asking questions about why they're doing what they're doing, they take it in the wrong way. I think they take it as being that I'm criticizing. I'm being critical, because I genuinely want people to investigate things.
Right.
That's great. But I want them to do it properly. I want them to get good evidence. And it was exactly the same when I was a police officer, is that you're looking for a good standard of evidence because you're trying to build a case. And if you gather it in the wrong way, the case falls apart. And it's getting people to work through things in a particular way, which they're not doing at the moment. And I try and give people the sort of the analogy of go back to when you were in school and you're doing maths, and that, you know, your teacher would ask you a question about, you know, add this together, what does it come up with? And it's not about just putting the answer at the end. They want to see how you've worked it out. How did you get from this stage to the answer? And I think that's where a lot of the investigators these days are going wrong. They're not explaining what they're doing. They're not writing it down. They're not making records. So it's getting people to look at the way that they behave on investigations, because we genuinely want them to gather evidence that's worthwhile. Yeah,
I like that you said that. I think the best way to phrase that for me in the future is, can you take this to court?
Yeah.
I like that. And, you know, for people listening that are investigating, you know, people like yourself, Dylan, you want there to be, you're excited for that to be, that the X factor's there, right? But you also want real evidence. You don't want nonsense. And I get that. That's, again, phrasing it back to being a cop. You're in a murder investigation, and someone comes to you, and just because they feel like this, you know, being part of that scenario, they throw their 2 cents in. That may destroy a case and set a criminal free.
Yeah, so exactly. So it's being methodological. It's just putting it together in a way that somebody coming along behind you can say, right, you've done this, this, and this, and I can see how you've done that and why you've done it. And I can go back and I can know that if I repeat the process, I can find the answers. But obviously, in what we're dealing with, we don't have the benefit of working in a laboratory, because we never really know when these things are going to happen.
Right. You know, I feel for you. That's tough. And like a lot of the paranormal researchers and investigators that I'd spoken to, and even, you know, off podcast, a lot of them have different perspectives, which is a good thing, right? I believe in that. You have to have different perspectives. Yeah. I find some people to be over-invested, though. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's the same thing as being closed-minded as saying, no, there isn't, is being closed-minded saying, absolutely there is. You just, until you have it, you don't know. And that, for me, that's a good thing, by the way, because that's a drive. I just don't know anything, and I want to learn more. And the only way I'm going to do that is if I approach everything with no filters on. It's a tough field.
It is.
For you, though, moving forward, how do you want to approach the field?
Oh, good question. I approach it very much, as I said, with an open mind, but taking things very, very slowly, and taking things stage by stage. I always, if somebody reports something, my main interest is gathering the evidence from the witness, is taking time, asking questions, going through it, building it up, writing it down, and then looking at what that person has said to me. And I think a lot of investigators out there will think I'm mad, but I don't see any point in using a lot of the equipment that they use.
Right.
To me, I would put it all away in a box and say, save your money. Don't bother using it. Get your pen, your pencil, your bit of paper, and start with the witness and build everything from there, because that's what it all comes down to. Unfortunately, what they see on television makes things look so dramatic, so exciting.
Yeah.
And it gives them the wrong idea about what goes on.
I think mainstream media really damaged the investigator badly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, pre-2000, and the numbers in the UK, pre-2000, there were about 120 groups investigating ghosts, hauntings, and that kind of thing. Now there's about 1,200 in the UK. In the States, there's about 4,000 now.
I'm pretty sure that's all in Florida.
Yeah, there are. I've been gathering for my PhD a database of groups and ghost hunters and whatever out there, and there does seem to be a lot in Florida.
I live in Tampa, and when I first started discussing the idea of doing this documentary and traveling, by the time I was done with research, I figured I was going to be in Florida for 5 years. So
right,
that's why I'm building this network and doing this, because if I had to investigate and start in Florida, I'd be here forever. There's so much going on here. It's crazy.
Well, do you know what? I mean, I visited Florida 3 times for holidays. I'm coming back next year. Can't wait. And I've got to say, if you're going to go and ghost hunt anywhere, Florida is great because the weather's wonderful most of the time.
Yeah.
So, it's a good place to go.
It's the scariest thing you're going to run into out here is probably gators, mosquitoes, snakes.
Yeah,
so,
a couple of snakes.
I'm a pretty brave guy, like noted, but you won't see me in a forest in Florida in the middle of the night because that's not going to happen.
No. Definitely not. But it's strange, isn't it? Because you think, which part of America would be the most haunted? Is it going to be somewhere like Chicago with all the things that were associated with that? Is it going to be New England because of, that's where the Pilgrims landed and, the American Revolution? Is it going to be places like Gettysburg because of all the battles and the American Civil War? But Florida seems to be inundated, doesn't it?
It's crazy. And then you read the history of Florida. This was some very violent things happen here. Between the Native Americans and the settlers and then the Spaniards. And I didn't even know half the stuff when I first started researching the paranormal, I learned that there were burial mounds of bodies. And I assume that's how the Native Americans buried themselves, right? But there was mass grave sites, and it's the insanity of the history of this state scares me. So, could there be paranormal stuff going on here? Sure, because it's crazy what took place in this little state. Not a little.
Yeah, I mean, I was really fortunate back in 2013 when I visited Florida for the second time. I'd read a book by the author Dave Latham. Who's based in Orlando, and we met up for lunch when I was in Orlando, and he's written books about I think it's the Florida Ghost Hunters Road Trip or something like that in Florida, and he's also written a couple of books on the ghosts of St. Augustine as well. So he said to me, you've really got to go and visit St. Augustine. So I took his advice and did, and absolutely fell in love with that place. So I revisited back in 2016, and my wife and I, when we come back next year, we've got a couple of nights up in St. Augustine again. So I'm going to definitely take up some of the ghost tours when I'm there. Yeah,
I know some of the guys out here too. I'll hook you up.
Oh, great. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I've interviewed someone. I talked to them off podcast. And when you get here, I'll have you in. We'll do a podcast in person, right?
Yeah, that'd be super. We're going to visit Ybor City the one night to take the ghost tour there as well.
10 minutes away from there. That works out.
Oh, wow.
So check this out. This is a little something I learned about Florida. St. Augustine's popular for the ghost sightings. Yeah. I talked to my guy, Richie. He does paranormal stuff out here. And then I discovered this little nugget. It's called Jupiter, Florida. It's on the other coast, south. And there's a little town in there. So off podcast, talking to a paranormal guy, I was asking to be on the show. He declined because he's one of those guys. He wants to investigate and not be bothered. He wants to be by him. He's a lone wolf, right? He really wants evidence. He has no YouTube channel. He has no social media. He just wants evidence, right? For his own, like me, his own curiosity or whatever it may be. I more or less think it's about the afterlife for him because he's at that phase where like, what happens to me when I go? Anyhow, I asked him, I said, where is there any place you would not go again? And he mentioned this town in Jupiter, Florida, like the small area. And he's like, I just won't go. I'm like, well, what happened? Because I don't want to talk about it. He just wouldn't talk about it. He'll talk about everything else but that particular incident. And so I'm gonna end up going down to this little town. I'll have to share it with you off podcast. I don't want to flood that area, but I'm gonna check it out. And hopefully, fingers crossed, that's I see something. And I'll have my camera. And if it's interesting, great. If it's evil, it's nice talking to you guys. So
yeah.
But outside of that, what is your position on afterlife? 'Cause that's the biggest question surrounding the paranormal. I mean, if I had to guess reasons why paranormal study exists, why the investigation. More than the curiosity is that big question. What happens to us after this?
I think that's something that once we realize at a certain point in our lives that, we're not immortal. And I think that sort of hits us some point in your teens, I think, or late teens, that you think, hang on, I'm not going to be here forever. And that's what makes you question things. And certainly then as you get older and moving towards that point in your life where you know that you've got less years in front of you than what you've got behind you, that starts to play more on your mind. But for me, I don't know. I really don't know what comes afterwards, if anything. Right. I'm not particularly religious. I'm just curious about what happens. What happens? Does some part of your consciousness survive? I don't know.
Yeah, I'd spoken to a couple of afterlife people on the podcast, Sidney Sherman and Roberta Grimes, and both of them had both of them make sense, right? They have their really strong points. I had this. Here's the thing with me. In my 20s, somewhere in my 20s, I grew up in a Catholic home. And somewhere in my 20s, I came to some realization that my brain is a computer and my body's the vessel that holds it. And when it turns off, that's it, right? Because when you hear about the mapping in the brain, you kind of come to this conclusion, like, well, I guess there is evidence that the brain stays active for some period of time after post-mortem. Yeah. But that could just be the computer, like you turn your computer off, there's still electricity running through until it's completely powered down. Yeah. And that's a problem with me, right? That I think that way. But then I hear from some of these people about some of the extraordinary things they've encountered, and your logic is replaced with hope, and that's what drives me down some of the afterlife question. Is there a hope there? Because, I'm a nostalgic person. Yeah. And I've had a lot of good times, a lot of good friends, et cetera, my family, and you don't want to let that go. And then you have that question. It's like, what the hell did I do this whole time here? Was there a purpose? So yeah, I think that's a good driving question. So I don't know how to approach that moving forward, but I'm going to talk to more people. For you in your field and what you've studied so far, is there anything that you've come across that maybe you couldn't explain or even raised a hair or two on the back of your neck?
I mean, there's been a few things. I spent a lot of time back in the early 2000s investigating a very old manor house in the South Wales valleys where I was living and working at the time. And this house was built in about the 1640s. And it played a very, very prominent part in the English Civil War in that part of the UK. And it's now a living history museum. So when you visit it today, there are people there dressed up in costume of the 1640s. They welcome you to the house. They ask you how you got there, and you usually say, well, I drove. And they say, drove? What do you mean drove? Do you not have a horse? Or, they really play the 1645, which is the year that it's set, very, very well. However, there are lots of unusual things that have been reported in that manor house. And most of the stuff happens either in the morning or late afternoon after a lot of the visitors have gone and the staff are closing up for the day. There have been a number of ghost sightings, objects get moved, voices are heard, footsteps are heard, lots of things get reported. And I spent a lot of time there back in sort of 2004 to 2006. And on one occasion, one evening, I can only describe it as an atmosphere in there which was really difficult to put into words. It was like a sort of an electrical feeling in the air. Oh. And two of us. It's
kind of like that feeling where you're in a room and you could feel tension, right?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, very much like that. And we thought we could hear children's voices upstairs. That's the most curious thing that has happened to me in that building. There were other occasions when small objects were found to have moved. We went into the room, half hour later got back, and they have little balls of soap. They had been moved around. It was like, well, how did that happen? You know?
Yeah, I'm like that. I put things, one incident in my life, and I can't say that it was supernatural, because I had a phone in my room. I listen to documentaries when I go to bed.
Yeah.
It's the only way I go to sleep. I can't go to bed in silence. I don't know why that is, my brain. So I had the phone facing up, and it was on a charger, so this way it wouldn't turn off midnight. And when I woke up, it was face down. And I know that doesn't sound like a big deal, but for me, if you knew me, I'm very particular, you know?
Right. Sure.
I have everything put a certain way, and I know where things are. Like, I don't lose keys because I put them in the same place every time. Like, everything's where it belongs. And so then I had to come, and I wear a Garmin Venue 2, so it has a sleep study on it. And I didn't see any stress levels in the middle of the night, nor did I see any wake points other than the small ones that are a minute or two here and there. So I had to wonder, did I do that in my sleep? Maybe I didn't. That's torture for me, by the way, because then even though it's so minuscule, I'm like, what the hell? How did that happen? Did I get up and move it? Did one of the girls come? Like, I have to run to these thoughts. It's crazy. But then, there's that curiosity side. It's like, wow, something moved that. Like, that's a desire. That's more of a desire, I imagine. And the memory plays nasty games on you, like you were saying earlier. Like, the only thing to a UFO I've ever witnessed was like this blue aqua kind of orb, and it was a storm out, and I'm really close enough to the airport where I live. And it faded. It didn't fly away. It was just absorbed by the storm. And so here's the problem. Every time I recall that particular time, less and less of the detail of that memory are in play, right? And that's the factor of our memory. So these are the things that I draw to, because there's that hope factor. Like, you want there to be something bad. And the mind's powerful. Who knows what your mind can make you see, think, or feel? That's another fact.
Yep, sure.
But I make room for the unknown. You have to, because again, what we consider science today may not be the case tomorrow, especially with technology. What we're going to be able to do soon. Like the more I watch these documentaries on technology and space exploration, that blows me away. We're going to study planets to figure out what kind of gases it has on it. It's ridiculous far away. Meanwhile, here on Earth, we could probably find something really interesting if we apply the science to it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
So for you, moving forward in your career, what would you like to happen?
Oh, dear me. I don't think we're going to get an answer to what ghosts are. If anything, other than I don't think we will. I think we're trying to do too much. We're trying to get this, the crock of gold at the end of the rainbow scenario. We discover that when we get this wonderful answer all in one go. I think we need to step back and take little steps and try and look for the little bits and gradually build up the picture. Because I think we're being too we're being over ambitious.
I agree. Like, look, when I was a kid, I thought we'd have a photon pack by now. So,
Hey, that would be great. I'm very fortunate to work with a wonderful guy. His name's Steve Parsons, and he's the author of a couple of books. He's just finalizing his PhD in physics, and he's been looking at infrasound and the part that plays in haunt type experiences. And he does some fantastic work, and if you can get him as a guest, I would really recommend it, because he's as I said, he's a physicist, he's a scientist from that aspect, and the way he breaks things down, and in his books he really explains that the steps that perhaps people should consider taking.
Right.
I think focusing on things more like temperature rather than being obsessed with EMFs.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because the way energy would affect something, right?
Yeah, I mean, temperature is the one thing that, Steve and I have had this conversation, and he says to me a lot, he said, temperature is the one thing that always seems to get mentioned, but we don't pay enough attention to it. There's always the temperature drop.
Definitely want to talk to him now, because that's a good point. I wonder why that is.
Well, it could be a psychological factor, because people are not very good at knowing what temperature or the range of temperature either has gone up or gone down. They're not very good at or sort of being accurate as to what the temperature is.
Right.
Is it a sort of physiological reaction to the fact that you're frightened, so you feel cold?
That's true. That's true, because
is there a genuine reason that the temperature has dropped around you?
That's a good point too. Like, as you said that, there have been, like, I guess it's not a great example, but I remember being a kid and sneaking back in the house to find out my mom caught me, and I got hot and flush, right? Like, it felt like I was on fire, burning skin. And then there's other times where I would feel cold, and I think that was from anxiety.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a good point. There's a lot of good points. I would be interested in speaking to him. I really would, in fact. Yeah.
Well, he's written 2 books, but the one I would point you to at the moment is called Ghostology. And it really does go into all the different things, EMFs, temperature, positive and negative ions, the equipment that investigators use, looking at EVP equipment, and looking at the types of microphones that are used, or the different types of recorders that are used. What are the drawbacks of them? This is the kind of guy who takes apart REM pods to find out how they work.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk to him now.
Yeah, he's brilliant. He really is. I can't recommend him highly enough.
That's the guy that's going to be. He's going to build the photon pack, man. That's going to happen.
Well, he's been quoted by NASA on some of his work.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, connect me, because I would love to talk to him.
Definitely.
Well, in closing, is there anything you want to add?
No. I mean, it's just been such a privilege to have a chat with you this evening.
Indeed.
I'd love to talk more about the ghosts of Florida, because I've got quite a few books behind me on the bookshelves from all over America, because the one thing I'm really interested in is the difference between the American hauntings and the British hauntings, and the kind of ghosts that you have there and the ones that we have here, sort of the heritage side of things. Just really like to talk to you more off air about those kinds of things.
Yeah. The ghosts in America, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
It's funny because I interviewed someone from South Korea, and you just don't hear anything about ghosts or UFOs or anything. And his explanation to that is because they're driven for success. They're at complete study. They're working, their school. He said, he goes, well, westernized countries have a lot of time in their hands. So I never considered that,
I mean, he's spot on. I mean, in 21st century Britain and the USA, the majority of people do believe in at least one paranormal belief or one kind of phenomena, whereas it's not so strong in other parts of the world.
Well, Asia
There's
especially.
Definitely something going on, and I think media has a response or has a part to play in that.
Oh, enormously. Yeah, because I don't want to say this for all of Asia, but for the majority, the media is controlled.
Right.
So there's really nothing to sensationalize, which that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, because now that I think about it, I'm trying to think of any other country that has crazy phenomena involved with it.
It's interesting because definitely the USA, Britain, Australia seems to be getting more now.
Yeah.
There are a lot of these, YouTube channels starting up. That they're starting to come through in India and Bangladesh now.
I'm wondering if they see a market, is what it is.
Yeah, there's definitely a huge market in it.
Yeah, that makes sense because it's even on this show. I do cover UFOs, ghosts. I also do health and wellness. I have detectives coming on to talk about cold cases, and so it's pretty. There's a variety there, but there's definitely a market for the paranormal. It's interesting, right? Especially in downtime. COVID had to, let's do the math here. COVID is the one reason I got really invested in this again, right?
Yeah.
I had time to be invested in it. Prior to that, I didn't give it 2 thoughts, right? And if I did, it was a small opinion. And I'll be the first to admit, I had very small-minded opinions prior to this. Pre-podcast was like, if it's not dead on a table or in a cage, I can't swallow it, right? And then again, what opened that doorway is what the U.S. military's captured as far as UFOs. As far as ghosts, outside of that one video I mentioned, I haven't seen anything that's really compelling. And that's what I'm trying to find.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's going to be me and a really high-end camera that I got. and it's for the documentary purpose. But outside of that, I'm not going to bring any real equipment because one, I'm not tech savvy at all. So it would just be equipment that I'd say I have it, and then it would just sit in the trunk for a while.
Can I just tell you a very quick story about something I saw the other week?
By all means.
I was observing a group investigating a location, and we were sat around the table, and the one investigator had a K2 meter in front of her, and it was on the table, and every now and again it would light up, as it does, and she would say, "Thank you, Spirit," to the questions that she was asking. So I said to her, "Oh, can you tell me how the EMF meter works?" And she said a couple of the stock phrases, which you tend to hear a lot, or the spirit controls it. And but we've done our base readings for the EMFs. So I said to her, "Does this EMF meter measure amplitude or frequency?" And she looked at me open-mouthed and went, "I don't know." I said, "Well, don't you think you should know how this piece of equipment works?" And she said, "Well, I suppose I should." I said, "Well, have you read anything about physics to do with electromagnetic fields?" And her response was, "Oh, I don't know anything about physics."
Yeah, see, that's tough. If you're going to have like I have a road pod, the Roadcaster, right?
Yeah.
The first thing I did was read everything about it. So if there was ever an issue, I know what to do. So yeah, it makes sense.
I mean, it's like, if you went into hospital and you're being seen to by a doctor who's got a bit of equipment that they're using to examine you, you want to be confident that that person knows what they're doing with it.
Yeah, the doctor's putting something on your chest, like, what is that? He's like, I don't even know. I just send a manual.
And they know how to read. They know what they're doing with it. And this is my point, is that if you're going to use something, know why you're doing it, and be prepared that if people are going to ask you questions, you've got your answers. Because if you haven't, it comes back to the building your case. It's going to fall apart really quickly, and that's a shame if you're passionate about what you're doing.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's tough too, because all the equipment, you're right, there's so much. There's a company that makes this equipment. I'm trying to get them on the show. I got to ask them, what the hell is this stuff? I mean, look, the idea of there being a ghost. So if I had to run to a theory in my mind, and I have some running, I guess the soul would be the energy, right? Because if you think what the brain is and what it does to your body, like if you think about this, you have nerve pain in your foot, it's your brain telling your foot you have nerve pain, right? It's connected. So the energy of your body, which is all the electricity that your brain produces, I imagine that energy being your soul. And if you're going to measure, capture, or visualize a spirit, it's got to be energy based. And so to measure, and this will be the question I'll come with your friend with, because if you're going to look for it, it would have to be energy based, right? What would measure that adequately, in your opinion?
Well, that's the problem, is that what is a ghost?
That's a good point.
We don't know what it is. We've got theories, but it's meaningless, isn't it?
You
spend a lot of time theorizing about it instead of concentrating on what facts have you got in front of you. Work with the facts, not with the theories.
Yeah.
Theories will come later on.
Yeah, can this go to court? Exactly.
Yeah, just deal with what you've got. The temperature's gone down. Right, why is the temperature going down? Keep looking at that. Things that you can do. The trouble with the K2 meter is it lights up, but nobody's recording what the measurement is. So it's like, well, how do you know? How are you gathering the data? You're not. You're just seeing lights go up and down.
Yeah, that's based on excitement, right? That's the hope drive again. I don't know. I got high standards, man. Like here, let's go to this. There's a ghost in my house. It starts talking. That's not good enough. I want to see you come out, right? Because I'm that guy. It's never enough. Like, even if an alien showed up at my house, like, all right, hold on. Before you do what you're going to do, let's figure out what you can do for me. Because I don't care what you do after that, right? I mean, I'm one of those. So I don't know. It's tough, especially in that field. I mean, there's some paranormal investigators. I put a lot behind them, because even the couple I mentioned earlier, the guy's more analytical and she's more the one that has the experience. I like them, and he's very straightforward. I'd spoken to some off podcasts where I had a really hard time. One was explained to me because I don't know the Lord a certain way that I'll never see him. I was like, oh, well, done. Because you have to think of it. There's ghost. It's universal. It shouldn't matter of a religion. It shouldn't matter or any ideology, right? It just, they exist if they do, period. Just like if you're going to exercise one, I don't think it's going to be one set religion. Obviously there's something in I'm not sure if there's a handbook out there for removing them, but I wouldn't imagine that. Well, if you're living in Indonesia, like, well, we need a Catholic priest because they don't recognize it. So
yeah,
it's tough. That's a tough field. And I certainly appreciate the perspective you're taking on it.
It's just remaining open-minded. That's all you can do.
Yep. And I make room for everything. I don't doubt anything till I have, again, if I can take it to court with doubt, I'll take it to court. If I can take it to court with belief, I'll take it to court.
Yeah.
But in between then, I don't know. I'm going to continue to press forward to hopefully see something. That's the hope. But in the meantime, Dylan, I had a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it, Adam. It's been great fun.
Indeed. So we'll talk again soon, my friend. And when you come to Florida, come visit.
Definitely.
Have a good night, sir.
Good night.